Hi, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter from Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast, part of the Fans First Sports Network, joined by my dear friend, the one and only, the great Johnny Shop. John, so next week, football season will have begun. It is our 16th year of doing this every week.
Yeah, we're just starting to figure it out. I think we're starting to figure it out. We've seen a lot of games. We've seen a lot of things. We've seen a lot of change. And like everybody else, we're excited to kick this thing off on Thursday night.
Can't wait. All right, we got a lot of topics to talk about. The first one I got to get to, I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden I got like 4 or 5 emails from people. And I don't know, maybe it was talked about on television or something, but people asking me, do I think Davante Adams can break Megatron's single season record from 2012 of 1,964 yards? I want your opinion. I'm going to give mine first. I think he absolutely can. He's the best receiver in football, and it's not close. I don't think it's close. He's just that. I've been around some superstars in my life. Okay. Irvin, and watched him up close, and Magic Johnson for everybody. Being from Michigan, growing up in Lansing, we know him as Irvin, but Magic Johnson. I remembered watching Kobe and Michael practice, and watching them up close when the cameras weren't on. Magic, ton of time, not a ton with Kobe and Michael, but enough to see what they were like. Barry Sanders, watching him. I got to watch Wayne Gretzky a couple of times. So I've been around greatness. Max Crosby, in my opinion, has everything greatness. Davante, Magic said this to me one time, John. He said, you can't be a great player unless you're a good player who makes everybody around you better. He said, if you're not making everybody around you better, you can't be great. You're just good. That stuck with me. I've asked I remember one time, asking other superstars about it, and they all agreed. Davante is that guy. He's a coach. He's a mentor. He's high character. There's nothing about him. If you took football away from him, just the man he is, he's what every dad wants his son to grow up and be like. He's what he wants your daughter to marry as far as just character. But this Raider team, I think Jimmy Garoppolo is more accurate. I think he's going to get him the ball more. But there's so much talent around him with it. An elite top 2 running back in Josh Jacobs. I don't think he gets to those numbers just because I don't think the Raiders are going to be that one-dimensional. And having watched and covered Calvin that year, it was all one-dimensional. It was embarrassingly, you knew it was Calvin or nothing. So I don't think he can, even though I think he's more talented than Calvin. What do you think? Where am I wrong?
Well, he's got another game. That certainly helps. I think the point you made about, is this the only option? Every play, is this the top option? That's a huge difference between Johnson. There really wasn't anything else in Detroit. The better situation for the Raiders is that he has an opportunity to get that many yards, but it's uncertain, or it's really not going to happen because it's being spread out so much. You talked about the young tight end. We don't know what's going to happen there, but we're hopefully going to find out pretty quickly. With Jacobs back in the mix, that's enormous. It's a huge difference as far as how many options you have. So I think the opportunity is there. You've got a new quarterback throwing to him, so you don't know for sure what's going to happen there. But as far as the skill set, mastering his craft, combining that mastery with pretty much an athletic peak, you see, well, there's an opportunity for it. It's something to watch for sure. I think we probably need to get deep into November before we know if there's a chance for it. And obviously, of course, you're always talking about health and staying healthy. That's a given. But as far as opportunity goes, you see it there. But I think the interesting point is, does this offense have to rely too much on trying to get the ball to him almost every play they can? If so, what kind of gas can he hold in his tank throughout a very long season? Again, the Raiders are going 12 straight weeks here to start. 12 straight weeks. That's not a short period of time. It's going to be something to watch. I would bet against it just because There's only one guy that's done it. And those circumstances were such that, I mean, I don't think those Lions had anything else going on that year other than Calvin Johnson.
It was terrible. All right, I want to get to the next one because there's a couple of rule changes I want to talk to you about. The first is the push rule. Let's talk about the push rule.
Points of clarification. This is interesting. We saw so many pushes last year. We saw them in the Super Bowl. We saw them used to success. There is a huge divide in the competition committee. Is that okay? Is that football or is that rugby? It's going to stay legal for now. Here's the interesting thing. A lot of young folks may not know this was illegal in the NFL for a long time. Then it had become legal, and now it's becoming in vogue. I love the Brady style sneak. I think it's one of the most effective plays to get a first down on short yardage. I don't love the push as much. It's interesting. You can't pull. That's deemed to be too dangerous, I think, for player safety. You're putting guys basically backwards. You can't pull anybody over, but you can push them. Let's keep an eye on this. This suspicion is that this is going to get more popular. I would agree with it. What I don't know is what teams can really do to stop it. You've got a combination of trying to go really low from the snap and other guys that are going to be flying through the air. You've got play action possibilities. I think we're going to have a 2-year window where this push is going to become more and more popular. We're going to see it more often. We're going to see everything develop around it, and then they're going to shut it back down. My guess is that it's not good, but I do like that. I think we can agree, we like a promotion of some balance. So something good for the running game is pretty good as a starting point, because we want to see more balance. We don't want to just see the sport become pass only.
No, and I'm going to say this to you, Johnny. I am frustrated with the wimpification of football. I know that's not a word. I don't care. It's my word. It's a wimpification. I love physicality. It's what makes this sport what it is. I understand quality of health for players. I get that, but even the players will tell you, we know the risks. Listen, push, drag, pull. I don't care. It's football. It reminds me of that old Olivia Newton-John song. I want to get physical. That's what football is.
Yeah, and I really like to keep an eye on this because I think we're going to see it drop down extensively to the college level, especially when there's a huge difference in athleticism between two teams, especially early in the schedule. And I think you might even see it in some of your high schools this year. At the NFL level, the physicality should be as tight as a drum. Really tight, but we're going to see some teams maybe be able to wear some down and other teams get worn down and maybe have their will broken. And when we get into talking about teams that are going to make playoff runs or what we think will coming up in the future, I actually have a different thought and emphasis on the running game. Who can push, who can do what the Eagles did in the Super Bowl and just wear somebody out. And even though they didn't win, even though they slip and slid all over that field, that was really the mass coming out party for the push. I think we're going to see it all over the league starting in week 1.
All right, next, the leading with the helmet rule. Your thoughts on this? Because let me just say this. Yeah, I hate the wimp. Yeah, I hate the wimpification of football. And I understand we've got people who, with a pure heart, are trying to make the game safe. I get that. I respect that. But there is a rule of unintended consequences. And so you would see quarterbacks lower their head and go helmet to helmet. And the defender, well, what was I supposed to do? I was trying to go at his midsection. He ducked. You'd see it with running backs, wide receivers. To me, it was always more offense than defense. I hated the rule. Now, do I want to see a guy out there sparing people? No. But I hated the rule. It was the wimpification. It's people who've never played, people who don't know the game, trying to legislate a game. You know, I always say this, and I'm not getting political at all. You can't legislate morality. You know, we saw when they said, okay, we're going to make all of alcohol legal, what happened. And I think, at least I hoped, America learned a lesson. You can't legislate morality. Now, you say, what's that got to do with football? You can't legislate physicality out of a physical game, because if you do, then you get soccer, where some guy looks at another guy, falls over, and the guy rips out his credit card and says you're out because you got too physical. I mean, I hate the wimpification, and I'm glad that they're going to try to be more careful here. John, this was good news for me.
Yeah, see, I think I'm on a different side of the fence here. The sport has done this from the beginning when they instituted downs. What's interesting to me is you all have seen it. The biggest offenders are the guys with the ball in their hand. That's what's so interesting about this points of clarification. It's time the NFL come down on the guy with the ball. If I can't commit unnecessary roughness as a defender, which is what the league and the sport want to restrain. You don't want unnecessary roughness. It's got to account for the guy with the ball. I can't tell you how many times I've seen games the last couple of years where I'm like, that's got to be 15 on the guy with the ball. He led with the crown of his helmet, which you cannot do. It's got to be a foul. They don't want it. It's just not okay. Or not so much a stiff arm, but something else unnecessary. So the interesting point of this clarification is the league is saying, we are aware who is doing this more often than not. And you with the ball do not have some kind of magical shield around you where you can lead with your head. If you do, it's got to be a penalty. Now, we've got to come up with a smart way to do that. We need a graduated penalty scale where if you do that with the ball, maybe it's a 5 or 10 yard penalty the first time. If you do it again in the game, then you're talking 15. If you do a third lead and hit with the helmet, then you're probably out of the game. That's the next step for the NFL. I'm with you. I don't want to wimpify the game. I also understand that we can't have people running around leading with the crown of their helmet, blindsiding people.
Yeah, I don't want that.
Need people leading with their helmet that have the ball. This is the interesting thing to me. There's going to be plays, mark it down, guaranteed in September, where people are going to be fined and or suspended and or penalized for the ball carrier looks like a simple play leading with his head. They want that out of there. I think it's good that the offensive players are going to be held to account. There's no reason they should be able to lead with their helmet when defenders cannot.
You know this, and I think you'll know who I'm talking about. I'm very close with several former running backs in the NFL, and one of them told me that they were watching film one time about this safety and how he likes to come in low. It was a very popular safety. And they said, so make sure when he's coming, you duck your head because there's a good chance you're going to get a helmet to helmet. And that's how I knew right then the wimpification was hurting the game that I love so much. Okay, let's keep going, because Joe Montana, many people consider, if not the greatest, the second greatest quarterback to ever play the game of football, or top 5. I'm just telling you what many people think. I've got him in my top 5.
Yeah.
He comes out and says, and I was so glad to hear this. He said that he thinks the best quarterback of all time was Dan Marino. Now, Dan Marino, in my opinion, I think I had Dan as number 2 or 3. I got him real close. And he told me I had Johnny Unitas as 1. That guy just did everything. I think he's 1. I think Tom Brady's 2. I had Dan Marino 3. But he talked about why he thought Dan Marino was the best. I love Dan Marino. It's not his fault the Dolphins didn't believe in defense. They should have played in the Big 12. Nice slam there, wasn't it? That doesn't believe in defense either. But Montana calls Marino the best ever. Johnny Shop, or as our fans call you, Johnny Guitars. I cannot wait to get your opinion. What you think of Montana saying Marino's the best?
Let's talk about it. And I got notes. I got a tablet to look at. First, I'm going to talk about what I think Montana's.
Such a lawyer.
Yes. Here's what I think Montana's intent was. I got to open people's eyes to a guy that played before the digital era and was gone. And for different reasons has gone off mostly quietly at this point into the sunset. I think what he was saying was, as an individual player, I think this guy's the best quarterback of all time. I think he's the best quarterback of all time because he had a release like no other. He had extraordinary accuracy. He could make a throw 360 degrees. He had a fantastic central processing unit for football, like super high football IQ. I understand what he's saying. Although I do think this discussion is great because it's getting qualified. He's talking about the best individual quarterback. There's certainly an argument to be made for him. I can't disagree with him. Joe Montana, to me, you've got probably a combination of certainly could be the best and most successful of all time. And maybe we need to have a conversation between Montana and Brady to figure that out. Because, and here's where it gets Raider centric, folks. If you have not seen Tom Brady explain the basic fundamental of how to play quarterback as he laid out in the barbershop show about a year and a half ago, you got to check it out. What he basically said, and I would love to hear what the coaches for the Raiders that worked with him and two of the quarterbacks that played with him think about what he laid out. He essentially said, my job is to identify what the defense is giving me when I get to the line, or obviously before that, but when I get to the line, and then execute it. He had narrowed down mastering the quarterback position to situational execution. That's why he was so successful so often. And that's the masterful work and product of a career studying the game. That's your basic 101. I don't know who else could lay out for you how to play and succeed at quarterback. He laid it right out. And I'm sure Montana would agree because he did the same thing. Now, my thoughts on who the best quarterback would be of all time. If we're going to just talk about the individual player and we're going to go on their stats and also maybe a little bit of projection of how good they could have been, for example, if they were on a team that decided to participate in defense a little more, which the Dolphins did not for Dan Marino. You can call me biased. I think John Elway is the guy for me. I think Elway's upside was a lot higher than he reached. I think he did reach a good upside.
No, that's a bad word in Raider Nation because most people don't know. Most, not because he was with the Broncos.
Yeah.
Is that Al Davis wanted him badly.
Of course.
And I think John wanted to be here. And the NFL and
can you imagine how much they would have slung it around and ran around? It would have been like I mean, John Elway's up there at Stanford. Of course, Al Davis knew who he was. I think he probably knew how great he could be. And I think he probably thought that
we wrote an article about it.
Yeah,
exactly. We wrote an article about it. I mean, and Tom Lamar, who's our Raider historian that writes on our staff, did a fun because he was beat writer for over 50 years on the team. He wrote an article how they wanted him and how the NFL ruined it. Can you imagine John Elway on the same team with Al, Sling, and Davis?
Yeah, I mean that's the fun of this idea. And you could say the same thing for Dan Marino. And there was rumors of Dan Marino going everywhere, including Oakland, I think at one time, or Los Angeles at one time, way back. But I like that Montana's bringing this up because it's helping people, first of all, have some fun, separate success from how good the player was. It's there's a good bit of speculation and thought into it. But if you haven't seen Tom Brady break down how to master the quarterback position, go check it out. Because when the games come down to when it's on the line, whether it's in baseball when the playoffs get going, whether it's in NFL and crunch time, and we're going to see some relatively big games that are going to have some meaning early in the season, it comes down to situational execution. At the quarterback position, can I identify what the defense is giving me, if anything, or can I make a move, a motion, this or that to present an opportunity, and then can I execute it? He laid it out for us.
All right, two more quick things to cover. We're on a schedule today, but I'm furious about this one. So you and I have talked a lot about last year with the Cardinals. The general manager gets suspended. Now we find out allegedly one of the staff members had a burner phone to talk to the GM. Here's the whole deal. I am convinced that the NFL is more theater than reality, because you see things that come along and you think, if this was not theater, this would be okay. You lose your job, you lose 2 first-round draft picks, whatever. You got to learn a rule is a rule, period. But you see a lot of theater. To me, I hate this because if you're going to suspend him and say he's gone, then he's got to be suspended and be gone. The problem is when stuff like this, the curtain gets removed and then fans see. See, the NFL knows it's theater. I have so many personal stories that I know. Guys getting fined and the commissioner, whatever. Uh, to me, but so when the curtain gets open and fans get to see behind the curtain, the NFL almost, okay, now we really have to do something or we're going to lose all credibility with the fans. They have to, even though I believe it was wink, wink, I don't think anybody thought the GM wasn't communicating. Now that it's so blatant, they've got to deal with it or they're going to continue to have zero credibility to the point where some people even now believe it's WWE. Yeah, it's real, it's physical, but it's predetermined. I think the NFL, I don't think they want to, but they have to. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, and we're a long way from that, but you don't even want to encroach 2 seconds on getting to a point where you're wondering, or there's a large enough audience wondering if any part of the NFL is fixed. I'm not talking about a frozen envelope so the Knicks can draft Patrick Ewing like the old NBA rumor. I'm talking about the most popular entertainment product in the country being at all orchestrated or following a script. That's one. Number two, the Cardinals are a mess, but it's bigger than anybody thought. This is the start of the process to find a new owner in Arizona. It's bad. It looks bad. The guy that owns the Cardinals doesn't realize how bad it looks. He's not going to realize how bad it looks. This is not from the offensive line coach's issue in Mexico where he wasn't even there. This goes back a couple years before. This goes back to a suspension of Steve Keim and then use of burner phones and somebody having filing a claim against it. I think it's McDonough filing a claim against the Cardinals. When that happens, you've got other people that are going to be asked questions. Head coach at the time, Steve Wilkes, I think interim head coach, is asked. He's laying it out. This is a bad sign for the Cardinals, a good sign for the NFL. I think the clock is beginning to tick on the Bidwell family in Arizona, and I got no allegiance to the Cardinals. I'm surprised they had any success. I think they are ripe for a new owner, and when it comes, hello, success.
Let me just say this. I don't think the Bidwells are going anywhere because I think the NFL is theater and he's too powerful of an owner. But I think it's horrible, and I think the NFL is in a lot of trouble. Okay, long term, not now. It's more popular now than ever.
Oh, yeah.
But I think as they keep heading towards, and more of this gets behind the curtain, and let me tell you, you can't, yeah.
All right. There's a huge, as we know, there's potentially a huge reveal behind the curtain coming that we can talk about when that time comes. But everybody who's watching this,
we're going to get to that in a couple weeks. In fact, during the bye week, you and I are going to talk a lot about the John Gruden lawsuit because there's a lot of angst. Okay, moving quickly. Last thing has nothing to do with football. It's just sports, and it impressed me. You know how much I respect the University of Nebraska at Lincoln.
Oh, yeah.
Their fans. It's an unbelievable place. I've never been in a place where the opposing team, when they come on the field, gets a standing ovation. If you make a good play, they credit it. It's just I tell people all the time, until you go to Nebraska Lincoln to watch a football game, you will not understand. They've sold over 90,000 seats for a girls volleyball game. I mean, to me, I saw the highlights. It was just awesome. I'm not a big volleyball fan. I like women's volleyball. I don't like men's. I just think but I just thought, going to give them props on this show. That was pretty cool.
It was. I saw it. 90,000 sold out, sea of red. Nebraska is they put their stamp on the map as, one of the biggest support of all time for a live women's college sports event. Women's college volleyball moves quick. If you can watch it and follow it on TV, it moves quick. And that's probably why
I enjoy watching it.
It is. Yeah, it moves pretty quick. So you can have it on. You're like, hey, but yeah, this is a huge moment for women's volleyball, a great moment for Nebraska, and a great moment for the Big Ten. There are special places around the country, as we know, in special stadiums, but that one in Lincoln does stand in its own special spot. It is not like all the others. It is unique to its own. That big red thing is real.
I agree. All right. He's the great Johnny Shop. You can check out the Spartan Pride podcast on the Fans First Sports Network. I'm Hondo Carpenter from Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, Las Vegas Raiders Insider podcast, also part of the Fans First Sports Network. We'll see you next time, everybody.